Boom.
How you doing?
Hey man, how's it going?
It's good.
What's going on?
Thanks for hopping on.
Chill,
Your hair
chill
game is
week,
on point as usual.
chill week for you. You just been,
Sleepless nights, probably on maybe 8 hours over 3 days.
Ooh,
ouch.
not good. You should get an 8sleep. Go to 8sleep.com/TBPN.
I have a Helix.
No.
No.
We'll get you to switch. Anyway.
No, it's great to have you on.
Yeah.
What's running through your brain? There's a bunch of things we can talk about, but where
what's
should we
top of
start?
mind?
Oh, just the contagion effects and potential collapse of the world economy. Simple stuff like that. You know,
How bad is
U.S.
it?
primacy.
Are you is there any element of cautiously optimistic about this for you, or are you just totally black-pilled on it?
I mean, my white pills are Lucy's, so I do
There we
have
go.
some of those. But you know, you're gonna need a higher milligram for
this week. Well,
Yeah, I mean,
walk me through
there's-
why is it so disruptive to you and what you do, and maybe just for the viewers, give a little background on yourself and the organization.
Sure. So I'm chief economist for the Foundation for American Innovation, repping the swag here.
FAI.
There we go.
We are a tech policy think tank in Washington, D.C., originally founded to bridge Silicon Valley and the D.C. culture. Today, we work on the intersection of national security, tech, and governance. I focus on AI, but cover sort of all economic issues as well. And, I think we kind of are at least associated with the sort of tech right, with you guys like yourselves. Like I'm rooting for y'all, and hopefully Martin Shkreli's Bloomberg terminal killer takes off, so then we can combine you guys and completely disrupt Bloomberg. So I think you see this in the administration too. The Trump administration is a series of factions or coalitions, and we are definitely in the mix. But Elon Musk today called Peter Navarro Peter Retardo, and I kind of definitely hard to argue with.
Can you talk about the bridge between Silicon Valley and DC? It feels like that bridge is massive at this point. There was a moment where maybe tech was drifting away from DC. But now it feels like tech has taken over DC. At the same time, you go back to the Obama administration. I always think about this statistic that I believe the number one organization that was non-governmental that Obama visited during his 8 years in office was Google. And so there was a moment when big tech and DC were tightly intertwined. It just happened to be with the Democratic Party. Now it happens to be with the Republican Party. But what is the state of the bridge, and how did we get here?
Yeah, I think it's almost like a qualitative difference. So if you think like the last 80 years, the power structure in the U.S. is being sort of either Wall Street or like West Texas Oil. So we either get like Rex Tillerson or Jamie Dimon.
Sure.
And since the internet took off, there's this new wealth on the West Coast, and as that sort of germinated and matured, it originally was just sort of like one interest group among many. You still had those two main power elites, and I think with this last election, it was sort of an example of Silicon Valley, at least a part of Silicon Valley, asserting itself as its own distinct power center.
Sure.
And that is very, very different. Of course, all the other power centers still exist to some degrees, and so it is sort of a constant struggle. I think there's a lot that this administration is doing great. The stuff on energy. I think DOGE at some point is going to turn to regulation, and that's what I'm most excited about. Once we start cutting whole parts of the CFR. Back in the day, I used to do like supersonic policy and worked early with Boom Aerospace, and it's good that they're getting a hearing now, and maybe I'll be able to fly to either coast in a couple hours rather than.
I'd love that.
so there's a lot to like. It's just and I think there's also like a steelman case for like these trade actions. We participate with like the Reindustrialized Conference. We have our own techno-industrial playbook that will be coming out in a couple weeks. So we're all on board for the America needs to build again, and that especially as AI like deflates all the knowledge sectors, like we're going to need more aluminum smelting and stuff,
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Is there any glimmer of hope that there's this Mar-a-Lago summit? I forget exactly what Chamath is referring
Accords.
to, but the Accords, and you do see reciprocal tariffs, but they actually have the effect of driving it down to zero tariffs anywhere in the world, either direction. Are you hopeful for that, and would that be a good outcome in your economic framework?
That would be sort of the best possible world. There's also risks associated with that, right? Because,
Sure.
I wrote a piece recently discussing the sort of way the market reacted. And, on the one hand, you could say, oh, Trump just likes tariffs. And that's definitely true. He has a 40-year track record of just liking tariffs.
Yeah.
But then you have other people like Stephen Moran and Scott Bessent and sort of JD Vance himself as well, who at various points talked about the curse of the U.S. dollar being international reserve currency. And there's a lot of truth to that. Like the fact that, China wants to hold our treasury debt and, they build cheap cars, we build treasury bills is, it does raise our living standards, but means that we are not ready to fight a war.
Yeah.
And so that is a core problem. But then the question is like, how do you deal with that? And if you do go all the way to a Mar-a-Lago Accord, what you're saying is this isn't just about tariffs. This is about resetting global financial imbalances.
Yep.
And we need to do that, but we need to do that sort of gradually. Because if you do this all at once, what that means is the entire floor will fall out of the stock market and the real estate market, and with huge cascading effects through margin calls. And I think mortgage debt is now back to its 2007 levels. So it's less to me about like the mood or the ideas behind the policy, but the execution.
Yeah.
That this is a rug pull of
Rugged.
Can you talk about the value of the yuan has been dropping? I guess it's at a record low. Can you talk about trade wars turning into currency wars and if that's what people should really be focused on?
Yeah, so China was a currency manipulator throughout a lot of the 2000s and early 2010s, but that really hasn't been the main way that they cheat. They cheat by basically suppressing household consumption and having these 60% savings rates. And so they end up building these ghost cities, and whatever technology they enter, whether it's cars or telecom equipment or pick your poison, they just overproduce it to the maximum, drive down the cost worldwide, and then have to find these export markets to dump it. And the way that we're ever going to resolve this is, especially now that like the U.S. is going to have 100% plus tariffs on China, and Europe doesn't want their shit either. They need to like build up their domestic economy. They need to like reduce their own savings rate, raise the standard of living of their households, like introduce like some basic, social welfare programs or something, so that they, actually have a domestic consumer base. And if they do that, like that's actually the best way that they can retaliate in a sense, because they're sort of shielding themselves from the tariffs, but it also it helps correct the big imbalance. And so that is like, it's sort of aligned in that sense where like if China does the right thing, then it's a win-win situation. If instead they double down on tariffs and trade war, I don't see we just exacerbate the contradictions in the economy and don't get to a resolution.
Ben Thompson has been advocating for a rethinking of the CHIPS Act, mainly shifting from export controls, removing those, and instead taking a more Operation Warp Speed approach where the U.S. government is potentially a massive buyer of domestic-made 3 nanometer, 5 nanometer chips. With the demand signal there, the American market should solve it. How are you processing the current CHIPS Act, and what are you hopeful for going forward?
I'm not opposed to the idea. The thing about like Nvidia's chips is the demand is kind of saturated, right? They can kind of pick who their buyers are because there's just so much demand for them, and at the same time, they've not been the most sort of like loyal actor in this space. And if there's any sort of big meta narrative or theme to a lot of the tech rights move into DC, it's been since from Project Maven on that these companies have had corporate social responsibility policies, but not corporate patriotic responsibility policies, and technology is becoming geopolitical, and you sort of have to pick your side. And so, every time we introduce an export control, NVIDIA's 2 weeks later has a new chip that just gets under the line of what's being controlled.
Mm-hmm.
And the latest one is the H20.
Yeah.
And the H20 is an inference chip. It will power these reasoning models. If we're worried at all about sort of staying competitive, I don't think we can give up on those. And in fact, we should be doubling down. And that would be like a smarter kind of trade war than just across the board tariffs. But that doesn't have to be mutually exclusive with doing a kind of industrial push. And that's what I'd like to see, because if we're going to do this big rebalancing, you can't just pull the rug. You have to, to mix my metaphors, you have to be the Indiana Jones that like swoops in the bag of sand or something as you take the Holy Grail. And what is that like new thing that we're going to be swooping in? What is the industrial bank that we're going to be using to bootstrap the industries that we need? Because they won't just materialize on their own.
Can you talk about putting the trade wars in the context of like this race for super intelligence, right? In many ways, people are arguing like, hey, if we're making like transformers like harder to get and more expensive, like does that hold us back from winning the AI race? And is that the only race that really matters? We've joked on the show about this idea of like picking up pennies like in front of a steamroller, right? Like AI's, has potential to transform the economy in so many ways. And like, if it's very possible that like that just winning AI matters more than like winning, the trade war in the year 2025.
No, I 100% agree with that take. Like, I can forgive a lot of stupid policy because in 4 years we're going to have such powerful AI systems that like really it swamps everything else. And we know what the bottlenecks are going to be, right? Like building these models only has a few basic ingredients. You have like the data and algorithms, which the US, the algorithms are basically public domain. The data, China maybe even has an advantage because they don't have privacy laws and they can just scoop up everyone's like genome or whatever. And, then it comes to like energy and chips. The export controls exist because right now our only structural advantage is at the chip and hardware stack, where, our install base of NVIDIA data centers is, a huge portion of the world's. China's been basically cut off since 2022 and 23. Then when it comes to energy, China added 446 gigawatts of energy last year. It was a 20% year-over-year increase. They're going to do that again this year. We added 0 net new energy. We had a lot of renewables, but it came directly out of coal and other sources. And so, the chips is the short run bottleneck. So that's why we need to lean into that. And then the long run is like, how are we going to supply the energy? And then as the stuff diffuses, to the people who worry about deindustrialization, it's true. The last 40 years, we've specialized in, higher education, knowledge work, legal management services, Hollywood, the creative class, all the stuff that is going to like be deflated. And China will have the factories that will become fully automated in due course because they'll also have the workforce that they can extract all the tacit knowledge out of and put into their robots. Mm-hmm. And so it's like a really urgent thing that we don't just like try to win on AI, but like win on AI plus heavy industry and robotics, because otherwise our innovation in bits will be their innovation in atoms.
Yeah. The one point of view on the trade war and trying to bring manufacturing back to America is like, yeah, we can bring the production capacity back, but will the jobs come back in the same way, right? Just due to if we actually want to scale production, we need to lean into automation and robotics. How do you think about job creation as part of reshoring and increasing domestic production in the context of long-term, a lot of production just becoming automated and just because that's going to be the most efficient way to produce the most amount of goods?
Yeah, we need to bring back manufacturing, but it's not a jobs program. That's for sure. In fact, the only way we're going to bring it back is if we automate significant amounts of this. And maybe the guy who presses the on button every morning gets paid, multiple six figures, but it's not going to be this nostalgic vision of like 1950s where we're all going into the factory. And that's just like a structural thing. We're not that, AI is going to do that for a lot of stuff, probably, most stuff at some point. And we're going to have to figure out what the new jobs are. Like I saw on, I saw a video of like professional back scratcher. You know, you know, I know in the VC world those exist already, but like, but this was like a woman with long acrylic nails, and so maybe we can start growing our nails out.
Crazy.
I mean,
So
my case is that there's so much knowledge work to do around an advanced factory. I mean, we just talked to Jay from the Advanced Manufacturing Company of America. There's clearly a lot of high skill labor that is not getting displaced anytime soon. That could.
That's not millions of people.
Yeah.
Well, it might be if we're manufacturing a Dyson sphere with 1,000,000 robots or something. I don't know. I could see a world where, yes, there are 1,000,000 jobs in the manufacturing sector, but it's all at the higher level.
But if 2 million, traditional like white collar jobs get evaporated,
in the interim, maybe.
There's clearly some big questions we're gonna have to be thinking about.
Yep.
Do you have strong opinions on Unitree or any of these other Chinese robotics companies that are trying to?
He's just like, I love them.
I'm curious if you've written about it, if you've had policy recommendations that you or FAI have made around. Some of these more hybrid sort of dual use. Well, everything's dual use in China, but
dual use
what do you think about Unitree?
No, the Unitree is really impressive, and I've seen it do like kung fu, and it does breakdancing better than that Australian lady.
Oh yeah.
Not the highest bar.
But if Shenzhen is like it's like going to a flea market where you trip over like baskets full of microelectronics, and we need to be building some of those like ecosystems in the U.S. That's number one. And number two is like, yes, we have the data centers and the better models, but China, has the batteries, right? They have like that. That's one area where they have leapfrogged us. And whether it's electric vehicles or robotics or drones, like we need to have our own battery stack. And maybe, we do need like a chips act too, but we also probably need like a batteries act. To compete with that, because that will be the thing. It's fine if Anduril builds a drone factory, but where are these batteries going to be coming from?
Yeah.
Not asking for financial advice, but where specifically in America are you long? Areas that could be that sort of American Shenzhen, or maybe it's multiple places. I'm curious what areas that different regions in the United States are do you think benefit from reshoring most intensely?
In recent history, it's been sort of the South and South Atlantic, the North Carolinas, the Tennessees, Nashville, partly because those also have the best housing markets, right? It's so much easier to build when you have greenfield. Mm-hmm. But longer term, this is also not something that the U.S. can do alone. Like we're going to need almost like a North American plus like production, frontier where, let's figure out the thing with Canada. Like, do we need their lumber? Don't we, whether going to, do we want their bags of milk or not? But like, we do need their aluminum, right? And we will need to have some kind of integrated production ecosystem to be kind of competitive and stand up to China. Because China, already in purchasing power parity is larger than the U.S. And they want to gobble up their neighbors too and get even bigger. So, but I do think there is an opportunity here, because when you do have like, I'm not a technological unemployment guy, I think new jobs get created. They'll just be very weird, not necessarily in the sectors that matter the most. Like the purpose of heavy industry and robotics is like more military, and like, do we control the supply of core goods and services?
Mm-hmm. On energy, what do you think the lowest hanging fruit is in terms of energy deregulation? Should we be focusing on the NRC, nuclear? What's the biggest opportunity to help us jump from, I guess, 0% to 20%, where I want to be? Maybe 40% would be nice. Maybe 200%.
Yeah, you guys should definitely have my colleague Thomas Hockman on to talk about this for a full half hour, because he's been putting up the wins lately. We've helped pass a bill in Utah. There's activity in like Arizona, Montana, and other places. There's a huge appetite to unlock America's energy. In the short run, especially for these data centers, it's going to be natural gas. It's going to be a bridge to more permanent base load energy. And then the next bottleneck is like the grid itself. because if you want to do even if it's just like natural gas generators rolling in, like that investment makes way more sense if you know that after that, GPT-7 is trained, that you get to put your energy back into a grid and have customers for it. So that needs to be fixed. Other energy sources, I think enhanced and advanced geothermal they were underrated. I think people are starting to finally wake up to the potential. With really advanced geothermal, we could make like everywhere in America kind of like Iceland, where like you have energy under your feet. And then with nuclear, there is this case before the courts that I think it's Texas, Utah versus the U.S. federal government, that the NRC, that argues that the NRC doesn't have jurisdiction over small modular reactors. And I think there's a good chance that Pam Bondi and the Attorney General settle that case. And in which case, states could then stand up their own licensing boards. And I think there's actually already movement in Utah to have their own like nuclear regulator. And so that could happen sooner than people realize.
That'd be fantastic.
Do a bunch of young founders building, small nuclear reactors, does that scare you? Does that keep you up at night, or do you think the technology is, it's solved?
Hey, Doug Bernauer at Radiant isn't that young. He's got kids. I trust him with my life.
Yeah, basically, I think it should be a requirement. You should have to have kids to be a nuclear founder.
He worked at SpaceX. He's got the pedigree. I love that company, based in El Segundo.
Yeah, the big problem with nuclear is it doesn't really pencil out without like large government support.
Yeah.
And so I would love to see like the $600 billion in tariff revenue, be given to Doug Burgum to like build a reactor template and build 200 of them all around the country, and like make this use every national security, national emergency trick in the book to get it done as quickly as possible. But it will need like some kind of, fixed capital backstop to make those investments, at least with the current technology.
I mean, given what you're kind of optimistic about Doge, it seems like you're pretty bearish about the tariffs. Like, are we in a regime where you trust the government to do mega projects yet? Because I think everyone was excited about the moon landing. And then since then, a little bit less excitement about the big projects. High-speed rail in California has been a little bit of a rough go. And I don't really want to see a California high-speed rail of $600 billion get burned on a nuclear strategy that doesn't produce a single watt of electricity for 70 years or something, which would be like the bad case.
Yeah, 100%. The state capacity and competence is really, it's the jagged frontier.
Yeah.
There's places that have a lot of it, places that have little of it. I would have more, I would have more trust in a Burgum or like a Chris Wright of actually, executing on something like that. It wouldn't be the Pete Buttigieg slush fund where it's just filling potholes in Indiana. They would know how to cut through the red tape. They wouldn't make it like this, everything bagel, we're going to build TSMC chips, but then also like, rehabilitate justice involved individuals. We need to keep our potatoes and our gravy separate. So,
got it. How are you thinking about the DeepSeek versus Meta's Llama strategy? We were talking about that earlier on the show, and it's kind of hard I think a lot of people on the vibes of DeepSeek, they're like, I don't like this. But then it's difficult to formulate an argument because are you anti-open source? In which case, are you anti-Zuck and Meta? How are you thinking about kind of the intellectual property that's being developed in America around large language models and then makes its way across the Pacific Ocean?
I think what I find most impressive about DeepSeek is less that the model they put up, but just that they sort of have imported a kind of Silicon Valley model of like, and that came from their CEO being like a hedge fund manager doing this as a side project. It's very, Sam Altman wasn't a hedge fund manager; he was a VC, but sort of analogous,
similar.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's striking because it's just a different model of corporate governance than you're used to seeing. And I think there's a question of like, how long does DeepSeek become a victim of its own success? And like, they are the tall poppy, and it's not that China tries to hurt them because of that, but actually tries to help them and makes them a national champion, and thereby sort of perverts it. But
it's a fun take.
they've been great at publishing what they're doing, and everything sort of has checked out. But they don't have the chips, and they've said that, like, their CEO said their biggest bottleneck is hardware, and so we shouldn't help them on that front. Like, there's $16 billion of orders for H20s just sort of sitting in limbo, about to go out the door. The Commerce Department has, Howard Lutnick has said that he's going to export control the H20, but they're so distracted by tariffs they haven't prioritized it, and the time is kind of running out.
What's going on with TikTok? We've been following the poly market around a new ban before May. There's markets around, potential buyers, things like that. Do you have any insight that you can share around the latest there? It feels like, again, one of those things that's just like not getting the attention and the focus, because obviously, if we enter into the greatest global trade war of all time, like, yeah, it's rightfully people should maybe be sort of focused on that. But at the same time, it feels like something that we were supposed to have answers around by now, and we definitely don't.
Yeah, totally. I mean, FAI, we led the charge to ban TikTok over a couple of years. And I fully support it. I also enjoy TikTok, but I do notice that, like, between my barbecuing steak videos and like funny memes, I'll get like a Pyongyang tourism board video now and then. It's like, well, that I don't plan on visiting North Korea anytime soon, but yeah, I don't have any super deep intel. There has been talks about, or rumors about, Oracle maybe being part of this, and I think Trump still wants it to be part of the new sovereign wealth fund. And actually, as sort of zany an idea that is, like, he kind of has a point. Like, if TikTok became American and quadrupled in value, that would actually help pay down the debt. The interesting thing here is, like, people have pointed out that Trump is sort of plays fast and loose with the Constitution, with the law and stuff like that. And as a matter of fact, all the people he's fired, totally constitutional. The most unconstitutional thing he's done today is not enforce the TikTok ban.
Oh yeah,
because that was a direct statute that Congress passed that said thou shalt ban TikTok. So I'm hopeful that they can get a deal. The reason I would just doubt it is China has very strong export controls. Like, the reason TikTok can't sell is because algorithms in general are export controlled, and so they would be able to buy the brand name and like the offices, but they'd have to completely revamp the algorithm, which is like the secret sauce of the thing. Now, TikTok is in our building in DC, so I can try to plant a bug for you if you want.
Sounds great. Well,
that'd be fantastic.
Polymarket has the chance of TikTok being on the App Store on May 1st at 97%. And who will acquire TikTok? Oracle's at 27%. Number 2, Larry Ellison directly at 24%. You'll love to see it. Amazon's still up there. But I just want to say thanks so much for joining. This was a really interesting conversation. We'll have to have you back soon.
Yeah, and get some sleep.
Anytime.
Yeah, get some sleep.
We'll work on getting you an 8 sleep so you can start putting in some proper sleep
I need
scores.
I
want to see 100 for a week straight. I think.
Less red light from the stock market. More.
More sleep.
Anyway, but go get some sleep. Thank you for coming on, and look forward to the next one.
Yeah, talk soon. Bye.
Later, Matt.